Thank you very much, Sean, and great to be here again. And a very warm welcome to our panelists. I'm very pleased and privileged to introduce today Becky Woods from ADP, Guy Smith from DLA Piper, and Tracy Filiola from Equinix. And I will give you a bit of time to introduce yourselves. Perhaps, Becky, do you want to start? Quick
Great,
intro.
thank you, and great to be with you all today. Like Mario said, I'm Becky Wood, Senior Director at ADP. I oversee our global mobility program as well as U.S. immigration programs, and I'm based in Northern New Jersey.
Thank you very much, Becky. Tracy.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Tracy Fiola. I head up the global mobility and immigration function for Equinix, based in London.
Thank you so much. And Guy, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. So Guy Smith, I'm head of global mobility at DLA Piper, which is a law firm. I'm officially based in Birmingham, in the UK, but actually live in London, so that's where I am at the moment. So yeah, looking forward to the session.
Thank you so much. And my name is Mario Ferraro. I work with ITX as their sales group's chief sales and marketing officer. Again, very interesting session so far. We've heard a lot about technology, the evolving role of mobility. And today, in the next 30 minutes, actually, we are going to focus pretty much on the role of technology. And I think we've heard many from the other presenters, many great aspects of technology, but I think there's nothing like hearing personal experiences from the three panelists. So I would like to ask the panelists, perhaps starting from you, Guy, could you give us your experience? Can you describe the technology, if any technology that you use to support your mobility function? And what difference is it making? Or if you don't have technology, what were some of the factors that led the organization decide not to invest? So what role does it play today in your respective organizations? Starting from Guy, please.
Sure. So I'm probably, our organization is probably the Neanderthal in this discussion, because we have absolutely no technology whatsoever. That's not through design, it's through accident. We do everything through Excel spreadsheets at the moment. To be honest, our HR function is relatively immature in its evolution, and it's really gone through a huge amount of transformation over the last 3 or 4 years. And so it's interesting for a quite large organization to actually have quite a new, if you like, HR function. That means across the board, a lot of HR processes, a lot of technology is all in development, but at the same time, it's exciting because we do have that opportunity. We are going through at the moment, just starting to implement a new HRIS system across the board. Within the organization, we're implementing a workflow and data storage platform across a number of support functions, so HR, finance, technology. So we aren't averse to technology. It's coming. And we're certainly interested to see how those can support us. But as I suspect most on the call will appreciate, a lot of non-global mobility specific technology doesn't actually do a lot of what we need from it. So whilst we'll wait to see what it can do to help with sort of process improvement, automation, perhaps sharing with some of our sort of offshored teams, I think, there are a number of elements from a pure global mobility requirements that will probably be lacking. So I think we're on that journey. So rather than we've got a conscious reason of choosing not to have it, we aren't there yet. What I would add though is, being lawyers, we tend to send people on fairly short-term assignments just by the nature of law being a fairly domestic practice. With that, we don't have as much demand for fully complicated cost estimate tool, tax engine, functionality, which is, I think, one of the main drivers that people push for global mobility technology, and therefore our drivers, when it comes to it, will probably be slightly different from perhaps what I've seen in the market before.
Great. Thank you, Guy. And I think your situation reflects actually the situation of many other organizations. I mean, you are definitely not alone in using Excel spreadsheets and emails. And very much, as you say, it's a matter of priorities. It sounds as if it's in the pipeline. You are going through some technology transformation. Eventually, someone will think of the mobility function and how to support those processes with technology infrastructure as well. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you. Becky, perhaps you can share with us the situation in ADP.
Yeah, so at ADP, we actually run an in-house program. So we don't partner much with an RMC. So we're unable to leverage their technology, which I know a lot of companies do. We do, however, for our U.S. immigration needs, we utilize the technology that our U.S. immigration vendor has. That is our single source of data for our U.S. immigration. And we do have a third-party expense provider, and we had been using them as well to leverage their technology. But what we actually did 2 or 3 years ago was really sit down and say, we need technology. So we went out to market and we picked one, and we actually went live last year. It's been great. It's the full gamut. Running cost estimates, creating letters of assignments, automating workflows, compensation collection, generating balance sheets. It does everything for us. So it's been a lot of work to get it implemented, but we're really happy with what we have right now. So we're in a good place. There's still sometimes occasionally where we're using our spreadsheets, and change can be hard. And it's like, no, wait, we have a system now. Let's do this in the system.
Right. And would you say that the major benefit has been for the mobility function in terms of having to do less work manually, or has that translated into benefits to the customers of the mobility function, such as the assignees or the managers?
Right. So both. One of the big reasons we really liked the technology was because it did speed up a lot of the work that we were doing manually before. So a lot of the deliverables we need to get out to the business, we can produce a lot faster.
Right.
So that was a big win for us in that regard.
Thank you so much, Becky, for sharing with us. Tracy, how about your organization? What's happening there in terms of technology?
Yeah, no. When I first joined Equinix, I joined with the aim of setting up the Global Mobility Program. So when I first joined, there was absolutely nothing there. But previously, before joining Equinix, I was in financial services in a very large program. So then you were surrounded by technology. So over my time in Equinix, it's been about trying to build how we use technology to kind of meet certain aims. So in Equinix, it is a smaller program, but it covers all forms of kind of cross-border activities. So it's quite broad in its remit. So we've had to kind of piece together where we use for technology and how. So we do leverage a technology and assignment tool. It's not one of kind of a larger tools out there because we couldn't justify the cost in terms of a cost per assignment, but we did recognize is we needed a technology platform to be able to do our costings, to pull the data from market data in there, to be able to do our assignment letters, to create some efficiency and some consistency in how we're actually approaching our activities, and fundamentally to be able to track all the different activities that we've got, so at least then we can keep sight and make sure we've kind of got some governance around there. So we developed that, we've kind of got that tool, which is housed by our relocation company, but also we've developed the development team as well, so that we're able to kind of tailor that to our own policies and build something that works for Equinix environments. There's more in that functionality that we can use, which we haven't switched on yet. And again, I think it's those decisions around, value versus the time and resources to kind of build that. So it's always that kind of juggle between what's your return on that investment, and also thinking about the cost and the optimization of all of that. And then also as well within that is the culture of the organization and how far can you push some of the technology advances, because even though we are a technology, because Equinix is data centers and it deals with technology as part of all of that, but culturally it's all very much heavily relationship based. So I think there is that balance, and I think it will be a slow evolution as we go into that piece. But we also utilize the technology very strongly with our tax providers and our immigration providers, and utilizing the technology that they have got. And that's where we have built business cases resources to be able to have projects so we can do that from a compliance point of view. So we also look after business travelers because it's all forms of cross-border activity that we look after. So we have got this pre-travel assessment tool, which we're building and developing right now so that we can cover assessments on immigration, Posted Workers Directive, A1 and certificate of coverage, and short-term business visitor tracking, and try to do some automation within that because it covers like all of our employees on that side as well. We also utilize our tax providers tool to manage our tax compliance season so we can track the compliance season in its entirety from end to end, but also making sure we're getting tax refunds back and all of that. And likewise, from an immigration point of view as well, being able to track everybody globally who is on some kind of sponsored visa, expiry dates, and the process around that one. So we've kind of built that as well. Still got more to do. And I do think there are some significant benefits to having the technology, but it's been understanding where your company is and what's going to give the best return on that investment for the company in that company's kind of evolution in its own right as well.
Thank you, Tracy. And those are some very, very important points. To be able to justify why are you doing it, and really what is the size, the shape, and the extent of what you need. What is really your need that needs to be addressed? Because again, the solution that you put in place needs to fit within a culture, needs to fit within a budget, needs to fit within limitations that you have in terms of the resources that you can dedicate to the implementation project, but also the ongoing management and operation of the tool. So it all needs to fit within an organizational context, and that's why it's important. Thank you very much. Let me remind the audience that please submit your questions. There is a Q&A panel. Please feel free to send us any questions that we will address at the end of this panel. We're kind of halfway there. So let me move on to the next question. I mean, we heard different situations from extensive use of technology to, like what Guy shared with us, technology that is somehow in the pipeline. That brings us to the point of how do you justify? Clearly, intuitively, we all know that it's always good to have technology as opposed to not having technology. But if you were to articulate the points in a business case, if we wanted to prepare a business case to convince your management, or perhaps the management of another organization as to why they should invest, what will be your key points? What will be your key selling points to articulate the value that technology could potentially bring to an organization? How would you go about it? Perhaps let me start from Becky, perhaps.
Right. So, and we actually went through this exercise a few years ago, so we could get our new technology in place. And really, our two main arguments were cost savings and freeing up our internal resources. So, in terms of cost savings, we were using an external provider to calculate our cost estimates. So that and a few other pieces of the comp collection process, we said, how much are we paying the vendor to do that versus if we can do it ourselves in the system, compare those two costs. That was pretty black and white. But in terms of the freeing up the internal resources, that was a pretty extensive exercise. What we did is we said, my team, again, because we're not an outsource model, but so how much time does everybody on my team spend moving someone and working on all these different types of moves? We have long-term assignments, we have short-term assignments, permanent transfers, business travelers. So if we looked at, okay, we have 10 long-term assignments this month, how much time are we spending on them? And we literally had a spreadsheet where we went line by line by line, what are all the tasks it takes to move someone? You have an initiation call with the employee. You have to initiate all the move, a household goods shipment. You have to set up tax prep services, A, B, C, D, everything. This spreadsheet was massive. And we went through, it takes a half an hour for this, 1 hour for that. Every single move type, multiplied that out by the volume and said, okay, we have 5 people on the team. what would it look like if we had the technology in place? Well, it wouldn't take me 5 hours to do a cost estimate. It would take me 1 hour. Okay. And where's all the place that we have the cost savings and how much can we free up the resources? So it was an extensive exercise, but it was worth it. And we got the approval.
Great. So it basically all comes down to justify it in terms of dollars and cents, but also how you want to utilize your resources. Okay, you have some valuable resources. Do you really want to utilize them for transactional tasks, or perhaps you can you redeploy those resources to more value-added roles? So great. Thank you for sharing, Becky. Tracy, perhaps, you know, I mean, you sounds like you've gone through that exercise as well from what you were saying earlier.
No, many times, and probably more to come. I always kind of think in you know, in terms of recommendations, I always kind of say the first thing to think about is actually get your business hat on. So don't think of it just purely in terms of your own department, global mobility. Put it as a very broad hat. You're thinking about running a business. What is it you're asking for? Does that make commercial sense? Does that make business sense? Because you have got to persuade your business leaders to invest in your program. So that's always kind of been one of my number one recommendations, because it's very easy to look introvert and you need to be a little bit different. The second thing I would say is really understand what is the problem that you're trying to solve for. Right. So many people have come to me throughout my career and like I said, so what, so what, so what? Right. So you've got to be in a position that you can answer that. So what is the problem? You know, what is the solutions, and really understand that, so that if you get any questions, you are able to kind of respond back and you're very, very, you know, confident in terms of your arguments and the reasons why. So I think that is a really important. And if you're talking about risks, really understand your risks, understand the benefits, understand the cost. And you've got to do some cost analysis. What is it going to cost you versus the benefits? And then step out again with that global mind, step outside. Does that make commercial sense? If it was your business, would you invest it in that one as well? Then, of course, obviously, you've got the components of building your business case then as to, you know, what is it you're trying to achieve, or the risk, or compliance is always a big one out there, you know, as well as efficiencies and cost savings. 100% all business areas would love cost savings. But the other thing I would also kind of recommend is think about who are you going to get your business case. So, you know, if it's the full executive board, right, think about, okay, how do you win support? Who are the other influencers? Because if it's just you on your own going in to request something, right, then, you know, your chances of success may be like diminished slightly. Whereas if you can get a pool of individuals, right, or other departments who are also supportive of you, then your argument becomes a little bit stronger. I did exactly that piece in Equinix when we had some kind of compliance gaps. Straight away I linked in then with tax and legal to create a forum. So then it became a tax, legal and global mobility voice to say, this is what the issue is. We agreed on the options, and this is what we're recommending. And as a consequence of that, we was able to get approval for the investment on the project.
Great.
So those would probably be my tips.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing, Tracy. And Guy, I guess your case, I'm not sure whether it's a hypothetical question, but how would you go about, you know, convincing? What would be the key words or the pain points, perhaps, that you could trigger in order to make them more receptive to a business case to invest in technology?
Yeah, and whilst we don't have technology here, in my consulting years, I actually have worked with one of the boutique global mobility tech providers. So we spent a lot of time, you know, in the sort of client engagements discussions to actually talk to them about, well, actually, what is going to be the justification? Because, you know, if you're going to try and sell something to them, you've got to help them work out how to buy it and justify it. And I would echo pretty much, you know, I think the key messages have very much been said. You know, we've talked a lot on today's conference around the role of global mobility. We've talked about sort of becoming more strategic, less administrative, and as Becky mentioned, you know, the time taken. You know, you do a quick count of sort of the time it takes to fill in a form, duplicating data, running a cost estimate manually in Excel versus sort of pressing a button to do it. Is almost sort of a justification in itself. You know, of course, with that, you know, I touch on duplication. You know, data security is a very key thing for technology. You know, we're seeing it in how we operate at the moment. You know, you fill in the same bit of information across multiple form. So, you've got duplication, you've got risk of errors, you've got risk of how that data is being shared. Is it secure? But I think also, as Tracy says, really actually having an understanding of actually what this technology is going to do to step change your delivery to the business, rather than just saying, hey, it's going to make our life better. What's it going to do for you as an organization?
Yeah.
I would also answer with a slightly different lens, which is to also, not just your business justification, but understand the market for technology. There are big assignment management solutions market leaders out there that are absolutely excellent, but aren't, the solution is not the same for everyone. And I think if you really, as Kerwin said in his opening speech, understand the why. Why do you want this technology? What do you want to get from it? And a bit like the sort of the borrow, beg and steal. Is it better to actually look at a partner vendor relationship? Is it better to buy technology yourself? What's involved in that? The implementation cost and time. The biggest thing I've heard throughout is the barrier to entry. And I think there's a responsibility on suppliers in the tech space to help with this, as well as for organizations to think about how can they get over that hurdle. How can you actually start on the technology journey with something small? As Tracy mentioned, she doesn't use it all. You start with something. Perhaps that doesn't cost you so much to get going, and you can build on it. So it's the building blocks, rather than perhaps saying, actually, I need hundreds of thousands to implement, and I've got a big 6-month project, and I need 2 resources full time to do it. That's a big ask. If you say, actually, I need a small amount of money, we're going to give it a trial, we're going to see how it goes, but we actually have found a solution that we can grow with and we can evolve with, then, I think that the barrier to entry, that hurdle, unfortunately, we're a specialist area of HR. Everyone thinks HRS can do everything. We know it doesn't. So it is a big ask, and it is a big commitment. So it's finding out actually how can you perhaps find ways around the brick wall to get started on that journey.
Great. Thank you so much. So basically what we are hearing is really finding a solution that is really commensurate with the size of the problem, first of all, and the size of the program, but also to understand from the business perspective, what are the key problems that we are trying to solve. Whatever solution we put in place needs to be directly mapped to specific pain points or specific objectives that the organization considers priorities, whether it's compliance, efficiency, cost management, or something else, perhaps even employee engagement or competitive advantage of some sort. Great content. I believe we have an extra few minutes. Let me check if we have any questions in the pipeline. Actually, we have the results of the spot polls that have been running throughout this. Let me just perhaps have a look at those. Maybe we can have some comments. So first question was, has the recent pandemic changed in any way the interaction between the mobility team and the business leaders? Most respondents say yes. Mobility team is consultant more frequently. And top concern, if you wanted to introduce mobility technology, the top concern will be cost, followed by convincing the leadership. So effectively, the business case. Okay. Perhaps I can pick on some of the questions that have come in and put them to the panel. Are there any gaps, especially for those of you like Tracy and Becky? What would you think would be the biggest gap today in your current technology capabilities? Things that you wish your technology tools could do, but perhaps they don't.
Yeah, so I'll kind of start off on this one. It's always been one of my, I haven't got the answers for it, but one of the biggest frustrations, because within Equinix, our remit is very broad. So we're covering, any form of kind of cross-border activity. And, with that, though, you've still got to have the same governance and the controls, and you've got to be able to have that full sight of everything that's happening. And, trying to either have a technology solution that can meet all of those needs, or have a technology where it can interface and you've got that. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, and I'm probably hoping for a miraculous miracle somewhere. But that would be lovely, because more unfortunately, what you end up with is a number of kind of technology solutions to meet certain needs and trying to kind of get that connectivity. So that's definitely one of those. And one of the other things, just to kind of close off, is that we've also introduced a Workday international assignment module, right? But again, it's very limited. So it's more of a kind of like a tracking, but there's very little behind that one. So that's the other kind of call out for me.
Thank you. So it's more like an integration issue. You can have lots of systems that work perfectly, but integrating them and putting them all into a nice seamless system that supports you that's a challenge. Thank you, Tracy. Becky, any comments from your side?
Yeah, I mean, so again, since we just went live last year, just in terms of gaps, none quickly come to mind. But what I can say is that where we struggle is we've got this great tool. We spent a very long time implementing it and customizing it to our program and our needs. Well, things change, right? Change is constant. So now we need to spend more time if we want to update a policy benefit or tweak something in our assignment letter. So does my team have the bandwidth and the knowledge and wherewithal to make those constant updates that need to keep happening? And even the technology itself keeps getting updated. And there's all these wonderful new snazzy things it can do. But if we don't have the bandwidth to make those upgrades for specifically our program, then we can't take advantage of them. So getting that great balance between the technology and then the support behind it to keep it relevant and doing what we need it to do.
Right. Great. And then in the last few minutes, I'd like to ask perhaps a question that will bring this conversation to a broader definition of technology, because so far we have kind of assumed that technology is primarily there to help us with the administrative tasks of running mobility programs. But one of the questions that came in is whether in the future, technology will ultimately lead to fewer physical deployments and more virtual assignments, perhaps coupled with some business trips. So do you think technology, with a capital T, so to speak, will ultimately create an environment where physical deployments may be not always necessary and perhaps moving more to virtual? Do you see that kind of being more prevalent in the future thanks to technology? Guy, perhaps start from you.
Yeah, I'll jump in because actually it was a topic of our breakout session in terms of virtual assignments, and I think the conclusion of the group was very much that they are a temporary situation due to the world we live in. And personally, 20 years of mobility, yes, technology is going to enable us in all elements of business, but I think in terms of why we actually move people internationally, definitely not. I think if we look at really why do people go and sit in another country to do something, is either because they physically need to be there, or that they're actually going to absorb culturally or partake or give out knowledge and experience that just generally won't happen. So yes, I think we've already seen technology, remote, as we're all sitting here on Zoom, conference calls, all the rest of it has facilitated. But I think as much as people generally hate getting on a plane for a business trip, everyone still values that face time that it brings. And I think that's really what assignments are all about, is the ability to actually be there to deliver or to learn or whatever it might be in a physical location. So I would say no.
Great, thank you so much. Any alternative views, or do you concur? Any comments? Tracy,
no, I definitely concur with Guy. Okay. I'll be honest, through default, we've had a number of kind of virtual assignments here. And we've even kind of looked at it as one of our development tools. But one of the things we do call out immediately is that it's got to be short term, because to try to do this for a long term, it's extremely hard on the individual. And again, to Kai's comments, I don't think you kind of get the same kind of values and the same benefits. It's all about experiential learning, right? And that exposure, and you don't get that unless you're actually in situ. So I totally agree. We might get pockets of where it may be appropriate, and it may be virtual on a short-term basis, supported with some additional business trips. But I think they will have a very targeted objective behind them, maybe a project team that they're trying to kind of work on, right? But I think in most cases, I think you've got to be in situ to kind of get the full benefits.
Wonderful. Becky, what's your view?
Yeah, no, I agree with the group. I think companies will scrutinize travel more and say, do you really need to go, or can you just accomplish this with a video call? But I think that's more going to impact the business travelers, the people that you need to be out there, long-term assignment, short-term assignment, project-based. There's a reason they're going there, and they really need to be there on the ground to fulfill the goals of the assignment.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a possibility it may flip on the other side, that actually less business travel, but actually if you're going to go, make it more of an extended business trip, for example, and get most value out of it. That's another possibility.
Right. Actually, I picked up some of such comments from some organizations, especially with some of the challenges nowadays of getting people across borders. They'll say, if we go through that trouble, we might as well keep them there for a long-term assignment rather than having to do lots of business trips. But interestingly, this question has actually been there since I started in mobility, more than 30 years ago. I mean, we always ask ourselves, will technology one day allow us to do business across borders without physically moving? In reality, technology is precisely what has enabled globalization, what has enabled companies to be connected globally, and that in turn led to quite actually a growth in the number of international assignments overall. Right.
Good for us.
Good for us. It keeps us in business. Maybe we have questions. Just time for just one more question, but I need you to be brief because we are almost out of time. What would you think about? Do you think it's better to invest in your own technology, or to leverage the platforms of third-party vendors through an outsourcing arrangement? Again, we heard, sometimes we may not want to make the investment, or perhaps we are not ready. Does it make sense to outsource before actually making that investment, to see whether you like it and to see whether to understand your needs and the benefits? Any comments? I'll leave it open to anyone. Yeah.
I jump in on that, just having seen a lot of this. What I would say is, obviously in terms of barrier to entry, there's a massive benefit potentially to leverage a partner and borrow. I think what you've got to be very careful of is if you outgrow that or want to change your vendor relationship, what does that mean? Now, I think there's been some very clever tech provider, other vendor relationships which have enabled an arm's length between the tech and the provider, so that you kind of own that technology, even though it's sort of sitting within a vendor. But it's just, if you embed too much, you've got to think about how strong is that vendor relationship as well as the value of the technology.
Good, great advice. Thank you. Any other comments?
No, the only bit of experience that I've had, having worked for a company in the past that wanted to kind of put its own stamp on every piece of technology or develop its own, was that it is a huge commitment and it's a huge cost. And so you just got to be, again, it's trying to get that balance, and there's no easy answer. But if you are going to develop your own, it depends on what the scale and what it is you're actually developing. Therefore, what's the investment involved? But you've potentially you could end up with a huge cost.
Right. Understand. Thank you so much, Becky. Any comments? Final comments from your side?
Yeah, just going back again to the subject matter expertise. If you're going to have it in-house, do you have people on your team that can maintain and support the technology, or can you rely on your HRIS team to do that? And if not, then you will need external resources to help you.
Right. Wonderful. I wish we could continue, but regrettably we have run out of time. But let me thank sincerely the panelists, Becky, Tracy, Guy. Thank you very much. I hope this was informative and useful for all of you. And we look forward to staying in touch. Thank you again. And I guess we have a coffee break coming up now. Thank you.